the first thing we should do before we do anything else is we're going to require 2 gems. The first thing we're going to do is type in require and then a string that says net/http and then require JSON, just like that. These are the 2 gems we're going to use to make sure that we can grab all the data from the GIPHY API using the URL that we just formatted in this format API URL request. Yes?
Is that unique to the GIPHY API or for all APIs?
This is great question. So these gems are actually for hitting any API, not just the GIPHY API. The GIPHY API is like, it's essentially all APIs make their data publicly available. If they do make it publicly available, and you can use the same process to hit any API you want. Really great question. So we've included all the gems needed to use APIs in Ruby. The next thing we need to do is we need to open an access point to grab that data. First thing we're going to do is we're going to create a variable called URI and set it equal to URI capital and say URL. Now the URI stands for Universal Resource Indicator, I believe, or something along those lines. Close, because URL is like Universal Resource Locator. There's some, it has a name. I'll check it in a second, but that's basically all you need to know about it. And then on the next line, we're going to use the Universal Resource Identifier to make sure that we can go get all the data. And I usually tell students that this establishes an address to go grab the data with Ruby. And then this next line right here, which is also a little funky, I call this one response, or actually let's just go with res, because res is just short for response. The response is actually a keyword in Sinatra that you shouldn't mess with because, and it'll tell you, by the way, it'll say response, it'll turn green. Don't do that. Just use res or something like that. And then we're going to use, again, net : capital HTTP .get. And what this does is it issues a GET request. In the same way that our application controller has a GET route, if someone tries to get the home page of our application, right here, when they use GET, what we're doing is we're getting, which is like basically typing in the URL into your browser. That's a GET request. In this case, we're using net HTTP to issue another GET request to go get that data from the URI. So this goes to actually get the data. So you can actually, instead of saying res, let's just call this data. That's probably a better name for this variable. So the data goes to grab, it grabs the data, and then we need to convert the data to a Ruby hash. And last but not least, we say formatted data equals JSON, capital JSON dot parse the data. And this converts the data to a Ruby hash, which I said right there. And once you have this, by the way, and to be honest, like I tell students that I don't have this memorized. Like I look this up almost every time I do this because it's a little confusing and it's not really explicit about what's going on here. These words like parse, URI, net HTTP get, like they're not intuitive. So for the most part, it's just you go, you look up how to do it, you figure it out. It's something that's technical, it's difficult, and then we do something cool with it. And now we're right there. In fact, I would usually just console.log this, the formatted data, and just show them we can get all the data in our Ruby application as soon as we want. Cool? And then I'm gonna return, I'm just gonna actually run this really quickly and we're gonna see what happens. Sound good? Cool. So back in your homepage, enter a search term, pandas, submit. Undefined local variable or method console. That makes sense because we returned a console.log, which is not Ruby code because I'm too used to writing JavaScript. We should put the formatted, I don't know what I was thinking there. Thanks for correcting me. I appreciate it, everyone. Let's try this again. No, I definitely did not. You cannot console.log in Ruby. My bad. Let's try it again. And cool, we should get nothing. The image shouldn't display. And we should see all of this data appear in our terminal. Whoa! There's all the data we get back from this response. When you get back all this data, it's like, what do I do with this? How do I figure out what I want? You know what I'm saying? Like, this is tough. I almost always, before I actually use it, I figure out what the path to the piece of data I want is. So this is why I almost always just go take this and enter it into my browser and figure out what's up. So I'm going to copy this whole thing into my browser, and I'm going to replace q equals search term with pandas, and I'm going to replace the part that says API key with my actual API key, this part right here. And hopefully I get data that makes it easy to read. Now, yours is not going to be as easy to read as mine unless you download a Chrome extension to make your JSON easy to read. And this is called JSON Formatter, which is the most useful Chrome extension I have, I think. I use it for pretty much everything, as soon as this JSON decides to actually work. All right, now that it finally loaded, Chrome is no longer as mad at me as it was a second ago. We get back this huge response. And if you look in your terminal, this is what it looks like in the terminal. This is just so hard to read, you can never figure out. Well, you could. If you're a champion, you want to just like read through it yourself. But I almost always go grab the JSON formatter extension, Chrome extension, and paste it into the URL first. And then I can just like look through the data and see what's up. So what is this first data structure we get back here? Yeah, it's a hash. The squiggly line means hash, right? And I'll usually like close the hash too, just so that my students can see that it's an enormous hash. But oh man, that's a bad idea, because now Chrome is going to take a couple other hours to make this work. But while we think this through, what's the first key in this hash? Data. And what is the value stored to that key? An array, right? It's got that, wait for it, it's got an array, right? And so this array holds a bunch of hashes. So it's a hash where the first key is data, and that key holds an array where the first item in that array and probably the rest of the items are hashes. And what we want to do is we want to step through this data. We want to say, okay, the response that we get back, and the first key is data, and then we want to go down to where it says images, which is the key in the first item in the data array. Oh my gosh, I know, right? Oh, there it finally closed. Beautiful. Now I'm going to open it back up. And you know what? By the way, while this is happening, I'm just going to go in here and I'm going to write down what I need. I'm going to say result equals formatted data. And what was the first key in formatted data that we really wanted to access? Data. And then what did data hold? What kind of data structure? An array. So we can take the first item in the array, or we could sample a random one. I think that's more fun. Dot sample a random hash from that array. And then we're going to need to get another key in that array. Let's see if Chrome is ready to deal with us yet. Nope. Yeah, the next one, if you remember, was images. Perfect. And if you read the next one, it was fixed height. And the last one is URL. Did you get it, Margaret? It's URL?
That's what I got. I didn't get it to work yet, but that's
URL. And by the way, this will work. And you could just leave it like this, or if you want to be really explicit, return the result. Just like that. And this, by the way, hopefully, if we actually enter this into our Sinatra application, it should give us a random GIF every time we click the button. Are you ready? I'm ready.
Let me just ask, so you have
Yes.
the result at the returning results?
I'm just explicitly returning result, even though you don't have to, because Ruby returns the last line evaluated. So this would totally work fine if I just left it like this, but I'm just being really explicit here because I put it in the comments. And so I'm just following the pseudocode that I already put in there. And I'm going to get rid of the formatted data. And this, by the way, there's only 5 lines in this method, even though they're really complicated. And so if we go back, and we go back in our Sinatra application, and we enter in pandas, oh, we get a random panda! Yeah! And if we refresh, let's make sure it's random. Let's do it again. More pandas! This is the greatest day of my life. I'm a panda. Yes, you are. Yes, you are. So that is how we can hit an API, get some data from the API, and do something fun with it. There's so much more to this, but I'm going to end this video here.